Thank you, Madam Controller. Jake, sir, would you take the roll, please?
It's Ms. Perot?
Present.
State Controller
Yes.
Owen? Mr. Tang?
Here.
Ms. Hendricks?
Here.
For the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ms. Sanders?
Here.
Chairperson Keeley, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Wow. Okay, item one of the Compensation Committee meeting. We have something that we're going to read into the public minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Please.
Yes, sir.
The CalSTRS board meetings are live web streamed, video archived, and available to the public on calstrs.com. Individuals who wish to address the board should wait for the 10-minute public comment period at the end of the agenda item the speaker wishes to address. For comments not pertaining to the specific agenda item, there will be an opportunity for additional statements at the end of the open session. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to comment. However, if there is not enough time for each speaker to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. To protect the privacy of speakers under the age of 18 who wish to address the board, only the first name and affiliated organization may be provided, but other personal identifying information such as their last name, age, or school may not be shared.
Thank you, sir. So I'll entertain a motion to approve today's agenda for the Comp Committee. So moved. Okay. Moved by Mr. Tang, seconded by Ms. Hendricks. Without objection, the agenda has been approved. So before I turn it over to Crystal and Christine, just high level, this meeting today is relatively straightforward. There's one action item. It's really around initiating an RFP this year. But the work plan for the Compensation Committee this year will also provide an opportunity for some education. I believe it's the first meeting in 2025 where we can all be educated on the current policy, how we got there, where it is today, what we're looking to do, potentially changes for 25, 26 going forward. So it's really not any more complex than that for today, is really hearing from the team as to how they're thinking about going about the RFP, what that will look like, a timeline, and having a primary compensation consultant identified by the end of this fiscal year. But the second part of this year will also be about education for ourselves, and we can talk a little bit about that later. But I'll turn it over to Crystal and Christine.
Mr. Chair, I'm actually, in respecting your time, going to turn this over to Christine DeLeon. She's the Assistant Director of Human Resources, and she's going to be presenting this item today.
Welcome, Ms. DeLeon. Have you presented before?
I have not.
Well, welcome. Yeah, welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you as well. So I'm here to present item 2, which is an action item regarding compensation consulting services. There are 2 parts to this item. I'll be seeking feedback and then followed up by approval. First, staff are seeking the approval of the committee to begin the process to issue an RFP to establish a pool of compensation consultants for services to the committee and board, as well as the selection of your primary compensation strategist. Currently, your primary strategist is Global Governance Advisors, and Mercer is also available to provide consulting services within your pool. These contracts were established in July of 2021 with a 5-year term, so they are set to expire on June 30th of 2026 with no ability for any extension. After staff's consideration of workloads and the committee's desire to complete a full review and compensation study, staff would like to begin this process slightly earlier than we have in the past to ensure continuity of consultative services to the committee and board. The second part of this item is to seek committee feedback and approval of the drafted scope of work provided to you as an attachment to this item. The proposed scope of work before you is broad, and the staff believe that it includes the consultative services needed by the committee and board. The last time that this scope of work was before you was in September of 2020. The committee provided valuable feedback with regards to including an awareness of the state budgeting impacts, as well as a union environment, which were included in the scope of work at that time. During our recent review of the scope of work, we've also added audit services for our compensation tools utilized by staff, as well as adding the additional classifications that were established following 2020 within our investment leadership classification series that is underneath the board's authority. I'm going to pass it over to Crystal for an additional comment.
Thank you, Christine. That was really great. Tough act to follow. I just wanted to point out for the board's attention in the scope of work, the proposed scope of work, specifically items 5 and 6. So that is carryover language from the previous scope of work. The board's primary compensation consultant did previously opine on the tools that were established for the CEO and CIO evaluation. As most of you are aware, over the years, the process and the tools have been refined by your governance consultant. And I just wanted to point out these 2 items. Obviously, the board has the flexibility to keep the language within the scope of work, or remove it, because we know this work has shifted to your governance consultant. Item 6, specifically on succession planning, I'm not sure from a historical perspective if your compensation consultant was ever involved in the succession planning process for your CEO and CIO. I don't think they traditionally have been. And so that may be something that the board considers removing altogether. But that, of course, is at your discretion. And I will pass this back to Christine.
Thanks. So we were just going to pause now for any feedback or questions with regards to the scope of work.
Sharon?
Yeah, thank you. And so the timeline that you described, Christine, so the contract we currently have goes through spring of 26, I heard you say, right? But we have the discretion as a committee to, because it looks like in the write-up that we're looking at potentially, starting this in July of 25, right? So we have the discretion at any time to amend that contract, or to, if we go with the same, we can extend it. If we go with a different, we can start that a year earlier than the contract, correct?
So after 2026, the 2 contracts that you have currently will expire. There's no option to extend, but the board has discretion to establish new contracts and a new pool and select a new primary compensation. Correct.
Okay, because I'm just trying to get the dates right. So their contract extends June 26.
Right.
We're looking at something to start potentially a year earlier, basically, approximately.
Selfishly, we're looking at our workload and thinking about some of the goals that the committee may have, just trying to get ahead of that workload.
And I appreciate the comments around the proposed scope of work as well. Because to this board member, I would say we work primarily with our governance consultant on 6, but I'm open to other committee members' input on that. So I think, yeah, retooling this a little bit to be a little more precise around comp consulting work versus maybe other work that we're doing with Amy and the governance consultant would be, I think, more prudent and have more clarity of roles. And then I guess I will just speak for myself that, having been on this board for quite some time, I'm looking forward to some educational items, because I just find compensation just continues to be a challenge for us as a board to get that right. And I know looking for consultants, it would just be helpful to have as much guidance and parameters around how we should be thinking about comp being a public entity in the United States, and just all the different factors that make us uniquely who we are. I think we need some tools on how to think about compensation. So I'm looking forward to the committee leadership helping us with that. So with that.
Ms. Perot?
So let me start by thanking you on this scope of work that we have highlighted, awareness of state budget. Obviously, that's something I think we have to think about the balance in which we know that as a public entity, we struggle with this, right? We have many of our employees here who are part of our union environment, rank file, and then we have, but in many ways, we also work with staff that, are more akin to, or their roles are more akin to the private investment world, but they're not. So I appreciate that we pulled that out and highlighted it. I would like to, and I don't know if it needs to necessarily be in the scope of work specifically, but I think as we move through the RFP process, and I know we've brought these comments out before, when we look at the compensation policy and how do we calculate that and the incentive, it would be good to be mindful that we are not just looking at an RFP that is only going to cultivate those entities who have a comparative work in the pension fund world, and that perhaps we also think about as we're working with, if this is a new consultant or we end up, with one we worked with in the past, considering some of the other some of the incentives that that our folks receive here that don't exist in the private world, our hybrid work, our pension. I mean, those do have some value in the overall package, so to speak. So again, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be in this scope of work, but I think it's something we want to be mindful of being part of the mix of conversation. So.
What I'm hearing you say is it's going to be important as you do a comprehensive compensation review that those things that you just outlined are captured by the consultant as you,
That they're mindful of it, that they're aware, and then that they can do some digging into what does that look like? What value does that add in a monetary way? So.
perspective. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I would like to, and thank you, Crystal, for pointing out numbers 5 and 6. And if I have a little experience, I would strongly recommend that we remove those from the compensation committee. It's not, they end up working, end up working with our governance consultant on succession planning, et cetera. So it's, if there's no objection to that, we're okay with that.
I'm sorry.
Madam Controller,
Say that one more time.
Sure. So in the comp consulting service solicitation, it outlines some of the responsibilities, one of which is makes recommendations for the executive and investment management succession planning and implementation. Mm-hmm. Somehow that ended up in compensation, where it's really, in practice and reality, we worked with our governance consultant on succession planning.
Can you hear me? I don't know if this thing works.
Very close to you.
Okay, hi. I think I'm here. I'm on. It's green. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Malia. Happy to be joining you in the late hour, last meeting of the day for many of us. I just wanted to go on the record and say that to me, removing 6 seems to make sense to me, but removing 5 seems like it should stay within the compensation committee. And I believe that 5 does have something to do. Excuse me. Yeah, 5 does have something to do with compensation, and that's just a little bit of the lens that how I'm looking at it. Just wanted to get that on the record.
That's fine. As I look at these, that's perfectly reasonable. Okay. With I don't need to think something I necessarily need to debate or discuss. I think that. Thank you for pointing that out.
So. Fight? You want to fight about it? He is a lover. He's Kevin Coyote. Harry Coyote. Who kills him with kindness.
My fighting days are over.
I love it.
Yeah, my fighting days are over.
I would agree. I'm not doing this right.
No, you're great.
No, I agree. I think the performance evaluation process does lend some value to still continue to have some conversation in the frame. But the succession planning piece seems like I'm not.
Great.
It doesn't make any sense.
So we'll do that. Okay, terrific. And then as it relates to an action, we need to take an action on the recommendation to ask the staff to begin the RFP process. So if we have a motion.
With the suggested removal, and I would move to move this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Tang.
So we're removing number 6.
Removing number 6, leaving number 5. Moved by Mr. Tang to advance the RFP process and have staff put this out, and seconded by Ms. Sanders. Any further discussion? Mr. Henninger, would you please take the roll?
For the Director of Finance, Ms. Perot. Controller Cohen. Mr. Tang. Ms. Hendricks. And for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ms. Sanders. Would you like to vote? Yeah. Thank you.
Christine, now that this is going to be, it's public, that we're beginning this process, what's the process for any of us? Should we receive inquiries about it or know of firms that might be interested? What's the proper process for us to follow?
Thank you for asking that question. If any of the committee members or board members have relationships with compensation consultants or just firms that they would like to be invited to bid on the RFP, please, I'm sorry, were you going to make a comment? No. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Council.
I would just encourage the committee members or board members to provide me contact information, and I can shift that over to our procurement analyst that's supporting us with this process. I would say, because once the RFP is published and we are actually in that public procurement process, there will be a no contact period of time. So the sooner I can get any contact information from board members, the better. We have a pretty aggressive timeline. I think we're going to try to have this published next week or the week after. We've already had some pre-meets with the procurement office. They've been great partners in this process. So if anyone has contact information, send me an email.
Thank you. Any information requests? I don't see any. Draft agenda for the next meeting?
Yes, there is one. The next meeting is going to be in January, and it will be focused on education with the specific agenda topic. Will be refined with the chair and the vice chair.
Opportunities for statements from the public?
We have no members of the public in the queue.
Okay. And I know it won't be reflected in the minutes, but I want to just amend something I said. When it comes to my daughters, Melissa and Sarah, I'm fighting to the end. Okay. Everybody else, go have it.
Okay.
All right?
Fair enough.
When it comes to those two,
Fair enough.
I'm going to the end.
Okay.
All right. So I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. So thank you, everyone, for a productive day and a good meeting. Thank you.
Good night.